Good day to you, good day. Today I want to take up the subject of what will an engaging father do. The issue arises and takes significance because we find many psychiatric consultations are now happening for those who are under 19 because kids feel a pressure. One does not know really where that pressure comes from. Mother makes it daily safe. Father gives the next step, next stretch, and the next spring. This is how ancient wisdom tells us. We will not conceal them from their children. We have heard and known, and our fathers have told us. So one generation, second generation, our fathers have told us. We will not conceal them from their children and tell to the generation to come the way of God and His strength and His wondrous works that He has done. He established a testimony, appointed a law. He commanded our fathers that they should teach them to their children, that the generation to come might know, even the children yet to be born, that they may arise and tell them to their children, and they should put their confidence in God. So this is about 4 generations of what a father should be doing. Today the focus is on the father. Of course, the mother should be also doing. So those who made the world, the present world, in their shape, in their likeness, are those who excel from 1960 to 2000, and they became the boomer generation. They were pioneers in science, in business. They really drove the consumerist revolution, so to say, that man began to consume all he needed and more than he needed, which was probably a reaction from the effect of the Second World War. And when the world was recovering, and there was a great reset at that time, that all nations could equally develop, as we saw Korea, which was decimated because of their own internal war in 1956, they arose to be a great economic power, and even with scientific genius, that is of course South Korea, whereas North Korea went communist. The point I make is, in 1960, the world was wide open for every nation to do their best and come to good prosperity, forward movement, and provide for their generations to come out of the resources God has allocated to every nation. So, world was an equal playing field, but between 1960 and 2000, many other systems came into play, and we found that global elite arose and global systems arose that made the playing field unequal. At the same time, national disasters like in Sri Lanka, corrupt politicians began to run down their own nation and play into the hand of global policy makers. Recently, they met in Davos, Switzerland, and spoke of a great reset, where the economic leaders and the hidden global elite spoke, and the politicians just listened to them because politics have become a bad name, and the way it goes is politicians have failed, and then it is tagged that popularly appointed politicians, that is democratically elected, within inverted commas of course, politicians have failed. Therefore, the resources must be managed by people not appointed by popular politics, but people who can deliver the goods that the politicians did not deliver. To me, this looks like asking the fox how to raise the poultry. That's a little translation of a proverb from my vernacular. That is, getting economic leaders to ask how nations should be run. So increasingly all resources have been concentrated or are being concentrated, national resources are being concentrated for grabs into the hands of global leaders who will set in motion global policies that will make every nation to be subservient to the great global reset. And we saw during the last disease time, pandemic time, how global health policies had to be obeyed, and they are still trying to make globally applicable health policies that every nation has to obey. Similarly, there will be global trade policies that every nation has to obey. There will be global carbon print policies every nation has to be obeyed. So the ecological turmoil, which is mostly coming out of the ocean and ocean's pollution, and corals are run down to about 40%, and in the human body, if kidneys run down to 33%, we call it chronic renal failure. And corals are the kidneys of the world because they keep the pH balance, acid-base balance of the world. And when they have run down to 40% because of the terrible ocean dumping and ocean pollution, little can be done on the surface of the earth, considering that oceans have the greater surface, oceans have the greater vegetation, and oceans produce the most amount of oxygen and absorbs most amount of carbon dioxide. So the liners or all the crude oil operations that go on in huge cruise liners, they take crude oil and they refine their own fuel in the mid-sea, and all the dumping that goes on of excess garments and whatnot have ruined the oceans. So the point I am coming to is, at 2020, we have a globally impoverished globe, and nations are paying the cost of that consumerist excess. We consumed from 1960 to 2000 all what we had for the next generations for 400 years, and also we consumed for the first time in history beyond what the ecosystems can handle. So here we are facing the consequences of almost all nations having political upheaval or people not trusting political system, and then the global godfathers, economic godfathers, saying, hand over to us the fowl, we will be the foxes that will look after what the politicians could not do. And we are already seeing the effects of it, and we are going to see more effects of such global control over sovereign nations. In a backdrop like this, I want to re-emphasize the role of the father at home. He teaches enterprise, and he gives the son and the daughter to make a plan, sow the seeds, wait for the harvest. 2, father teaches children to initiate, navigate to successful end conclusion. Father teaches the children executive ability, how to decide and to take it to the desired goal, so that we work with a reward motive. Every hour this has to be so. For our default mode network works every hour for focused work, which is called salience, driven by dopamine in the physiological level, and we move to serotonin satiety, well done, reward motive. If kids are on the digital screen too much, they get into dopamine addictive, and they want to do the same thing again and again. They have lost the plot, lost the goal, lost their default mode network of initiation, navigation, successful end conclusion, and reward. So 4th point, fathers teach empathy, relate to others for their betterment, and own their weaknesses or failure. So we have to own the weaknesses and the failures of our children and coach them to do better. So we don't use the language you always fail, but we use the language you can improve. 5thly, fathers teach every child to climb every mountain, envision and encourage. Also fathers teach point number 6, when you are in a valley, when you are out of your wits, know your limits and ask for help early. 7thly, fathers make reward your operational mode. Means must match how you get to the end, and end will not justify the means. We have to teach these things in a world increasingly where rapacious, raven-like attitudes of shout, scowl, howl, growl, and grab and take it from others anyhow, somehow. 8th, we expect acceptance and we expect success. So this is part of our identity and belonging in our family. And also, if we work with God our Father, then when our parents fail, they don't know how to manage, or they fail, or they abdicate, or whatever happens, there is a Father in heaven who is working for our best destiny, best God's scope, even when parents don't know what to do. So my advice to parents is, don't criticize governments and economic difficulties in front of children, because they lose hope. So children are getting into a bipolar kind of situation where they want to trust their parents, but the parents are talking a language of uncertainty, and that may include you're not performing what you ought to when we are finding it so difficult to invest in you. Secondly, because of the digital mode and the digital screen, kids are getting into intense passion, addiction into the fantastic, paranormal, supranormal, planets, avatar, hobbits and what not, because of the screen. And they are passionate for that, and they don't like the daily things, they hate. So they are in two extremes. Recently I had a girl who came with the father for consultation, and she wants to become a writer, and she loves the fantastic. She's already publishing online. I asked her, what's your favorite subject at school? She said, I hate all my subjects. So they are into the fantastic with a passion, which is addictive, unreality, augmented reality, virtual reality, which is unreality, thinking it's doable, when what they have to do daily for success and for step up, they hate. So they are torn between these fantastic illusions and not doing the daily doables. So when we encourage children to read books, we must encourage them to read, even if it's mystery or fantasy, doable fantasies and doable mysteries. If not, increasingly, they begin to pitch their affection, intense addiction to things that are not doable. So expect acceptance and receive success. Then the dad embodies point number 9, sacrifice, embodiment of what you speak, in how you do. You count the cost and invest in others. These are the lessons we teach our children as they grow. 10thly and finally, we lead by example, and we entrust, empower our progeny. This is true for work seniors as well, just as in the family. In the work field also, we want to carry these values. Now we want to get to the point of those who made the world in their image. 1960 to 2000, the boomer generation, they were the pioneers of the work field, scientific progress, and many politicians. Now they are passing 60, passing 65. And then arose the millennial generation, who are now about the 40s, the Zuckerberg generation. And thankfully, there was a generation in between who are now 45. They were the xennial, xennial. They were the bridge generation, because the millennials are so different from the boomers. This smaller group of xennials, who are now 45 to 50, glued the world together, between the generals who were boomers, who said, do it as I say, no second questions. That's how we ran the world in science, academics, professions, business, and so on. But there were those who are now 43, 45. Thankfully, they were able to stand in the gap between these boomers, who are generals listening to nobody, making the world after their image. And that looked fun, and that looked progress, as long as the world had enough resources to go around. But as the gap widened, in 1970, about 60% of the world's resources were consumed by about 40% of people. So which means the economic divide or the disparity wasn't great. But by 2010, 90% of the world's resources were being consumed by 10% of the world's population. So that's how wide the gap got, the disparity got. So we had the xennials stepping in and bridging and relating to the millennials, so the socio-economic political cohesion still could go on. Now we have genZies, the Argale generation, who protested everywhere for anything. Sri Lanka had its own struggle that went on last year. Before that, Black Lives Matter and bringing down monuments of Churchill and other Western leaders in Western cities, there was an upheaval. And genZies have come to stay. So I have published this little booklet, which I am happy to send to you. I have called it genZies, Runners Over the Wall While Throwing Curveballs. If I can send an e-copy or post it to you, I am Dr. Lalith Mendis and my WhatsApp number is 074-211-5011, 074-211-5011. If you are listening from abroad, it should be +94 74 211 5011. So that's a little book explaining to you what the genZies are like, how their brain makeup is like, and why we have to work in a 4-generational world: boomers, xennials, millennials, and the genZies. Now there is a gap between genZies who are 24 and millennials who are now 40, and that gap is occupied by another bridge generation whom I have called trillennials, because they wanted to work on their own and they have established some success. So they were kind of pioneers. So we are anyway working across 4 generations. So what must boomers do? They have had their say. So those fathers who did great things, took great strides, now must love the xennials who are having a tough job aligning different decade groups who are thinking different things. So they have to align the 40 to 50 year olds, they have to align the 30 to 40 year olds, they have to align the 20 to 30 year olds, and they have to align the genZies who want to be CEOs immediately. So if boomer fathers allow xennials who are 45 to take the decisions with the same passion, same foundation, same value, but different methodology, this boomer pioneers must give way to the xennial 45-year-olds to manage the next decade, getting very different kinds of value sets to play the game for the nation and for the family. Family is God's idea. So when smart cities are being planned by the World Economic Forum and work is being isolated to do more at home, so all social relationships are being run down and schools more online. So the Great Reset will attempt to cut off human interaction, so humans could become zombies and be controlled by artificial intelligence and with online tactics, setups, reset. So this was the discussion in Davos, Switzerland, where the economic planners waxed eloquent and the politicians who were invited listened meekly to what's going on. So that's the way the world is pushing. How does it translate to you? Again, I repeat, as a boomer pioneer who has pioneered a field of enterprise, now the 45-year-olds are taking over. You need to allow them to plan the methodologies to a world that is thinking differently, going differently, accelerating changes, and then they have to harness the best abilities of the next generation, which may not be your call. Then you are important to watch their tracks, guard them from either side, and give you a shoulder and give a heave when they want to heave in the direction they are going. So you were a great blessing. Now don't become a boulder. You know what a boulder is? You sit tight in the middle of everything and you can't be shifted. That would not be a blessing. So guard their tracks. Give them advice that they ask for. You may be still visionary. You may still have good ideas. Make them their ideas. Give your counsel so that they can take it at their pace, at their level, in their way, because their method is different from our method. But we are working towards the same goals. A great family, a great next generation, nations thriving in the call God has for a nation. Nations were God's idea. So was it a good thing that there are so many nations with so many languages? How have you thought? Because we do have race problems or language problems here and there at times. Imagine one world governed by a few elite who are very powerful intellectually or monetarily and controls the whole world. So the main antidote for controlling the whole world was God's methodology of putting them into classrooms called nations with their languages, setting their boundary and giving them nations with adequate resources that every nation may thrive. Every nation has adequate resources. If you think of Sri Lanka, we can be 6 times our budget in doing any one of these things well. The IT, the garments, tourism, fisheries, agriculture, plantations, in any one of these areas, we can raise a national budget and be 6 times more than what we nationally require annually. And we have gone down. So the point I am making is, God made the nations, each nation a classroom, looking after its own kind and interacting with other nations for the betterment of all. So this story happened in 2400 BC, when nations developed languages, and the theory of evolution has no explanation for how the languages came about. I am speaking scientifically, I am speaking with information. I have written about it in a book called Love, Light and Life, which is available on Amazon. If you want it, please send me a WhatsApp to 074 211 5011. So I just touched on the nation scenes because we are heading into some kind of reset planned by global planners, and today the news is out that they expect the US dollar to crash end of February. Now, US wasn't a saint. They did imperialism US style. But when the dollar crashes, whom do you think would be the world's dictator? A nation like US or unknown people behind the scenes, economic giants, the global elite who are pulling all the wires and all online stuff to control every nation, take resources into their hand, artificial food manufacture, stories about carbon print, and that's the reset they have in mind. So it's a good time to know the Good Shepherd, read his word, and this is all described in his word, in his book. As for me personally, I was an atheist just before I entered medical faculty. In 1970 exam, GCE A-level exam, sitting for bioscience, chemistry, physics, botany, so I became first in the island. And in the Colombo Medical Faculty, I became batch top in every exam. Before entering the Colombo Medical Faculty, I had an ideological reorientation, and I studied and came to the conclusion that world cannot be explained without a great benefactor. If there is no great benefactor, man will play God, and that has been terrible. I can send you a little booklet on my research in this area. I have called it Academics for Spirituality. You can send me a WhatsApp to 074211501. Also, you can download my app free of charge. It's called Golden Nuggets, no cost, Golden Nuggets. Please download it from App Store or Google. Thank you for listening. We will meet again.